Give me your face. The day before my birthday turned out to be full of chores, because at night I barely dragged myself to bed and collapsed into it without undressing. I was woken up by a loud noise in my ears, like static on the radio. It feels like 10 minutes have passed since I fell asleep. The unpleasant discovery for me was that my body seemed paralyzed. I did not feel it. All that remained was to turn my eyes around and wait for this strange paralysis to pass. The feeling of fear that appeared exactly from the moment I woke up began to gain momentum. Probably, this is what animal fear is talking about. My room was illuminated by several LEDs from the system unit and a dim lantern in front of the house, the light from which fell on my blanket. I noticed a movement to my left, and already at that moment I was ready to run out of my room with such screams as my throat is capable of. But I still couldn't lift a finger. And this something was moving slowly and silently towards my bed. I felt the weight of this creature, which was climbing on top of me from the side of my legs. Tears sprang from my eyes, but I couldn't even make a sound, as if I'd never had vocal cords. And it crept higher and higher and finally reached the patch of light. Save and preserve, Jesus. I will never forget. Two white eyes with horizontally narrowed pupils, located at different heights relative to the nose, looked at me. There was so much anger and hatred in this look, a thin wrinkled mouth twisted in a silent growl. This creature stared at me for a moment longer, and then jumped, throwing its arms forward. It grabbed my head, groped for my ears, put its fingers behind them and cut the skin. I felt hot streams gushing down my neck. The creature was thrusting its fingers into my wounds and pulling at my ears, my skin. I heard a crackling, squelching sound. I would have passed out from the hellish pain long ago, but something kept me conscious. And it kept pulling and clipping with its claws. Where it needed to. In the end, the creature got its way and tore off my face? Yes, probably. As if triumphantly, it lifted the torn skin above itself and slowly, savoring the moment, brought it closer to its muzzle until it put it on. The creature seemed to purr with pleasure and began to back away, suddenly stopped, jerked back sharply, and with an imperceptible movement slashed at my throat with a claw. I woke up. It's like melted lead was poured into my head. I don't know how much more I tossed and turned without sleep, but in the end I turned off. And in the morning I found uneven scars 2 centimeters each under the earlobes and a thin, barely noticeable stripe on the neck. After a couple of weeks, my facial wrinkles deepened. Now I am 21 years old, my body is from a young girl, and my face is from a decrepit old woman. Doctors claim that this is an atypical form of progeria. They want to study and offer plastic surgery. But I know that no amount of plastic surgery will help me anymore. It came to me on my 20th birthday and put an end to my whole life. You will read this entry, dear readers, and it will also be found as a suicide note. I'm coming for you, get ready. It was late in the evening, the children had already fallen asleep, the husband had not yet returned from the second shift. Tired of work and household chores, I fell on the bed and immediately fell asleep. And suddenly, in a dream, I heard sharp, strong blows on the window pane. It seemed that it had shattered. I knew that they couldn't knock on the window. I had a bad feeling, but at that moment I didn't realize that I had been given a sign. I had a dream at night. I was riding a bus, walking through Moscow markets. I lived in Kazakhstan. There is an abundance of goods on the market. I ask for a bright dress, and they offer me a black one. Then I find myself in the meat aisles. I see a lot of meat with blood. When I woke up, I thought about the dream for a long time. Something was wrong with it. Everything was falling out of hand at work. When I returned home, I was surprised. My husband suggested dinner. The thought flashed, something has happened. The telegram was brief. Come, Mom is in a bad condition. I flew to Moscow in the morning. I was choking on tears all the way, and I was tormented by the question, what could have happened? I saw my mother 2 months ago, returning with the children from Anapa. I stopped in Moscow, where my close relatives lived. A few months before that, Mom moved in with her brother. After my father's death, she lived alone for 3 years, and we insisted that she move in with one of the 3 of us. We have 2 sisters and a brother. The choice fell on my brother. He had a cottage in the Moscow region. There was enough space. Now I understand how hard it was for her to adapt. She was used to being a hostess. She never depended on anyone. I really missed my garden, my vegetable garden, and my friends. She had enough work, but understanding was not always enough. When my mother was 16 years old, she worked as a nurse in a hospital, and an old man died while she was on duty. Before he died, he called her over. "Come to me, baby. Here, take it." With these words, he held out his hand to her and died. In fear, she ran to the doctor and cried, "Pyotr Ivanovich, grandfather is dead." He said to me, "Here, take it," and died. The doctor calmed her down. "Well, Pashenka, you will be our assistant or doctor. It all depends on what he gave you. If good. Grandpa gave her the go-ahead. All my life, people were attracted to my mother, and she helped everyone as much as she could. She had a difficult life: hunger, war, a missing husband, and 3 children in her arms. 2 of them, a son and a daughter, died. One daughter, Nadia, remained as a memory of her beloved husband. For 9 years, my mother waited for her husband's return, hoped, filed a wanted list, but to no avail. Then she got married and had a brother and me. She saw my father in the mirror when they were guessing at some holiday. "My daughter, I met him the way I saw him in the mirror," she told me later. Even the sheepskin coat and hat were exactly the same. Interestingly, Mom never dreamed of her first husband, but she so wanted to see him at least in a dream. She loved watching documentaries about the war, about concentration camps. She kept hoping to see him alive. She didn't want to believe that he was dead. She told me that an elder told her that she would see her first husband before he died. When we went to visit relatives in Moscow, my mother was going to visit me. She packed her things several times and unpacked her suitcase again, as if someone was bothering her. On the day of my departure, she said, "My daughter, I will accompany you, but I will not go myself yet." I didn't sleep all night today. I was thinking, after all, I haven't received a pension yet after moving. I'll wait. Suddenly something will be requested. And she was a little sick. Everything will be settled, and I will come. We boarded the train. There was still time before departure. Mom gave the kids money for ice cream. They scored a lot. But my sister and I don't eat ice cream. It was hot. The ice cream started to melt. I offered to throw some of it away, but Mom said, "It's a pity. I'd rather eat at home." The departure signal was given, and the train started moving. She was left on the platform with a melted ice cream in her hands, small and defenseless. And suddenly a thought flashed through my mind: this is the last time I'll see her like this. And I started crying. And now I was flying to my mother, not knowing what was wrong with her. When my brother and I came to the hospital, 2 bodies were driven past us. I felt sick. The ground was gone from under my feet. But Mom was still alive and was very surprised that I came. "My daughter, you have a job, little children. I've already been operated on. Now everything will be fine." She was still recovering from anesthesia and was happy that everything was over. How was she supposed to know that the doctors had given her no more than a day to live? They cut and sewed her up like a dead man. Before the operation, my mother had a dream about her first husband. He came and said, "I'm coming for you, get ready." I followed him, tripped and fell. She wiped her hands on her apron, it was all covered in blood, and burst into tears. He sat down on a stump, and I buried my face in his lap. He stroked my head and said, "That's it, honey, it's time. So let's go. He's in front, I'm behind him." Instead of the days allotted to her, her mother lived for a month. We were constantly near her and even began to doubt the diagnosis, sinned against the doctors. After all, my mother was 70 years old. They don't want to treat the young. Why bother with the old? However, she was constantly given painkillers and did not suffer. During the rounds, the doctors were always perplexed. How does she live? A unique case. She was lying at the end of the corridor behind a screen in the surgical department. They had not transferred to oncology. They hoped for an early death. On the 1st of November, my mother asked, "Daughter, What is the date today? It's my birthday soon. The next day she got worse, and by all signs I realized that she was dying. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Mom took a deep breath, exhaled, and died. Her lips twisted as if she was trying to smile or say something. We had to wait until the morning because there were no taxis at night. It was such a time. We talked with my brother and cried. And suddenly there was a light breeze, and my mother's whisper, "Don't cry, don't." Her soul was with us. Mom believed in God. She was very hardworking, cheerful, and could heal people. Apparently, that old man gave her his gift. She treated only with prayers and hands. At that time, all this was forbidden. Many did not believe, so my mother, wherever she lived, tried to hide it. But out of her kindness, she helped someone anyway, and people told others about it. I never took money. If someone gave it, I felt awkward. Even the doctors turned to her. One day a policeman came, a colonel. Mom was very scared. She began to say that she did not know how to heal, and he knelt in front of her. "I beg you, cure my child." Mom helped everyone by taking the pain on herself, but she couldn't help herself. Early in the morning we arrived from the hospital to see my brother. Our sister met us. She already understood everything. We were sitting in the kitchen, talking quietly, crying. Suddenly we heard a terrible noise. My 8-year-old niece was running from the second floor and screaming, "You know, our grandmother died." She was at my place, cut wings out of paper, said she was dead, and flew out the window. We fell into a stupor. "Yes, Grandma died, we know that. But calm down, it seemed to you." But she was crying and trying to prove that it was real. Everyone felt uneasy. They gave me sleeping pills in the afternoon to make me fall asleep because I hadn't slept for 2 days and there were a lot of things to do. I only slept for 2 hours and I dreamed about my mother. She asked, "My daughter, why was I cut up a second time?" Not knowing what to say, and in order not to look into her eyes, I reached under the bed for my slippers and said, "You didn't get up for a very long time, you formed adhesions, so they cut you up." And she replied, "Well, I see now." And then I kept thinking, why was I cut up a second time? As it turned out later, at that time she was anatomized in the morgue to confirm the diagnosis. Mom was born under the sign of Scorpio. It is true that the death of a Scorpio gives birth. Before her death, she had a great-granddaughter and her sister had a grandson. Yes, some die, others are born. This is the law of nature. A glass of water. This happened in September last year. But, dear reader, for some reason the feeling of what happened is not erased in memory, as it usually happens, but on the contrary, it is postponed by a heavy sediment, acquiring an increasingly gloomy aftertaste. Although, it's much darker. I don't even know where to start, with the fact that my father was a good man or with the fact that my sister Libba was a rare bitch. Shortly I am already an adult man, with my family, wife and 2 children, with an apartment, a cottage, a car and, albeit not very beloved, but a profitable job. In short, the middle class or, to put it locally, the average cattle. And so it is. But it is self-critical. My sister was a student at a pedagogical university where she was enrolled rather than actually studied. She liked to hang out at the club, go to another city to visit friends, the devil knows what kind of bigwigs, love rich guys and, I suspect, serve them as a litter more than once. My father was a hard worker all his life, never cheated on his wife, i.e. our mother, kept the family and thought only about raising children. He was a very good and kind man, our dad. One day he fell ill. Old age has mowed down. He lived alone, because I already had my own family, and Luba went to live in a student dorm in her freshman year. Meanwhile, the old man needed daily care. They did not take him to the hospital, leaving him to live out in his native bed. The cynicism of doctors is sometimes admired, isn't it? As soon as my father fell ill, I immediately noticed that Luba practically registered with him under the pretext of leaving, of course. I put the internet and cable TV in the apartment, replaced some furniture and household appliances, filled the refrigerator with products that my father would not touch. Well, you get what I'm getting at, right? Okay, I thought then, let it be that way. As long as I keep an eye on my father. I really hoped for this, because I didn't have much time myself. However, my hopes were not fulfilled. Every time I snatched an extra hour before or after work and ran to visit the old man, I found him lying alone in his room. Luba was not there. My father didn't complain, no. It's not in his rules, but I saw everything perfectly well without complaining. I saw empty beer cans and Yagi in other rooms, saw untreated bed sores on his body, and empty glass on the bedside table. Dad's sad, uncomprehending look. The first thing I did was to ventilate the apartment properly, since the air in my father's room was stale, and the other rooms stank of alcohol, cigarettes, and God knows what else. He fed and watered his father, gave him medicines, carried out various other procedures, the mention of which would be superfluous, told him the news, first of all about his beloved grandchildren. And only after that I called Luba. Time after time, it became more and more difficult to contain the irritation from her incompetent lies. I'm studying, I'll be there soon. How's the folder? Everything okay? Okay, what? What? Oh, you're yelling again. I can't keep up with everything. Alright, come on. I'll be right there. One evening I lost my temper. I waited for her arrival on purpose, and when Luba deigned to come home at 12:30, I forcibly dragged her into the kitchen where I expressed everything in the most rude form. Oh, he came to teach me. What the fuck is there to teach you? My parents didn't teach me, the school didn't teach me, and I won't teach you. She made a vague gesture with her hand, saying, don't itch in your ear. Why are you so irresponsible? Why don't you take care of your father? I'm not courting? My sister screamed, gobbling at me with eyes cloudy from alcohol. How could you say that? You think it's easy, huh? Do you think so? I'm already exhausted. Oh, poor thing. She was exhausted. She went on a binge. Fuck you. I even moved here to look after Dad. Don't yell. You fool. I barked louder than I wanted to. You'll wake up your father. Oh, how caring we are. I know why you moved here. I spat in disgust. You're just showing off. Luba looked at me for a long time and then burst into disgusting, drunken laughter. I barely managed to calm her down. I repeat again, fuck you, she sang in a low voice and awkwardly sat down on a stool. I can see right through you. I've found my son, too. Are you thinking of building your family? It's probably a little cramped for 4 people in a 1-bedroom, huh? A little cramped? You better shut up. Why are you shutting my mouth? Tell me, am I not speaking correctly? I was tempted to punch her in the face with all my might. Instead, I slowly put my fist down on the table and said slowly, no, you're not saying it right. Everything is great with my family, and so it will continue. Is that clear? I see. Luba swayed. The girl, apparently, was in a drunken stupor. I remember how she put her elbows on the table and, burying her face in her hands, began to cry uncontrollably. She roared and talked endlessly. Her intonations changed abruptly and unexpectedly. She chirped in a gentle, pleading voice, then proved something to me on a breakdown, then in one breath, recitative gave out whole monologues. In a word, a drunken tantrum. But why didn't I figure it out right away? Why did I, instead of distantly watching the vile picture, stand and greedily listen to her every phrase, getting more and more annoyed? Meanwhile, Luba assured me that she was unhappy and lonely, that she felt terribly sorry for her father, that it was difficult and bad for her. It's been a long time since I've heard such nonsense. At one point, we were talking about the apartment again. Deciding that if I was silent and did not argue, then I must be gradually losing ground, Luba began to argumentatively prove to me that the apartment rightfully belongs to her. That's when I got carried away. I slammed my palm on the table and screamed at the top of my voice, forgetting about the neighbors, about the time on the clock, and even about my sleeping father. I shouted that she was a talentless, lazy, greedy animal, that she did not love anyone and had never loved anyone, including her family. I was rushing around the kitchen like an angry bull and still couldn't calm down. At the end, I added, "You know what, you bastard? Fuck you, not the apartment. You'll never get it, even if I have to hire a lawyer and fight it off through the courts." My sister looked at me with a long and, as it seemed to her, piercing look, after which she bared her teeth in an evil, disgusting smile. "Can you hear yourself?" she said sarcastically. "The whole truth comes out of you with the shit. You and your family are just waiting for the old man to give an oak tree." It was too much. I jumped up to my sister and backhanded her in the jaw. Luba screamed and fell to the floor and stared at me in amazement. "How dare you?" I did not find a new batch of tears and sobs. In a rage, I rushed out into the corridor, intending to get away immediately, but I remembered about my father. "Maybe you haven't heard?" I thought wistfully then. "No, I heard it. His hearing is excellent." I forced myself to look into his bedroom. "Dad, are you asleep?" He turned over on the bed and answered something sleepily. Too deliberately, he never knew how to lie. I went over to his bed and looked bitterly at his wrinkled face. I remember thinking then what a gorgeous, fluffy mustache he had. "You are a poor man, ******. The death of my sister came as a complete surprise to all of us. She was found dead in the toilet of the academic building. Friends told me later that she was very sick from a hangover and took some crappy pills by the handful. I don't know who got them for her. And is it difficult? I don't think so. I could not tell my sick father this terrible news and hid it as best I could. Now, the whole burden of caring for my father has fallen on my shoulders. Although, what am I talking about? One rainy autumn evening, I was in a hurry to visit my dad. Having bought everything I needed, I moved through the courtyard I had known since childhood and soon came out to the entrance. There were some suspicious characters in front of him, obviously of gangster tendencies. I wasn't really afraid of them, but I didn't want any extra problems, so I hurried to slip inside. In the dark, I came face to face with a horrible-looking homeless woman who smelled so bad that I almost threw up. She was wrapped in tattered rags. Her head was hidden by a hood. Shuffling her feet on the concrete floor, the homeless woman passed by without paying much attention to me. I grumbled, glancing with displeasure at the dirty footprints, and moved on. When I went up to the third floor, to my horror, I found that the front door of my father's apartment was ajar. With my heart pounding, I jumped inside. The dirty tracks of the homeless woman were visible everywhere. Here and there were lumps of dirt. No longer hoping to see my father safe and sound, I flew into his bedroom. Dad, as if nothing had happened, was lying in bed and looking out the window with his faded and already a little crazy eyes. "Dad, what happened? Was she here? Was this in here?" My father looked at me and frowned in surprise. "What aunt?" Lubasha came by. "She's what?" I didn't even have time to exhale in relief. "Who came to see you just now?" "I'm telling you," Luba dropped by. I frowned harder than ever. "A very unhappy old man has lost his mind." She poured me some water, straightened the blanket. "Yeah," my father muttered into his mustache. I went to the window and saw a familiar staggering figure in the distance. She was mercilessly storming from side to side. Her aunt somehow shifted her legs and was about to fall. I watched her go for a long time, wondering if I should catch up with the scoundrel or not. "My son." I turned abruptly away from the window. "Yes, father?" Why was she so weird? So silent and untidy? Something was bothering me. At first glance, nothing of value was missing from the apartment, and how much could that homeless woman have taken with her? But there's a glass on the bedside table. It was really full, though thoroughly stained. And there was a dropped one lying next to the bed. Goosebumps ran down my back. Something turned over in my stomach. I couldn't believe my eyes. Slowly approaching my father's bed, I bent down and picked up the funeral wreath from the floor, which was on my sister's forehead during the burial. But it couldn't be. It just couldn't. I jumped to the window again. My mouth was dry with horror, and my throat was constricted. Mother of God, it wasn't a homeless woman, it was my sister. Why was she gone for so long? Father asked quietly. She was on a camping trip, I croaked, barely audible in response. In what kind of campaign? With students. For potatoes. It's autumn after all. Ah, for potatoes, my father smiled knowingly. It's a good thing. Yes, it's good. The father was silent for a while and, with a heavy exhalation, said, Don't be angry with her, Valadenka. She's still young, the wind is in her head. When she grows up, she'll figure it out for herself. Don't scold her, Volodya. And I'm wondering why she's so dirty and silent. And look, out of the fields, straight to me. Well done. Tired, I suppose? Yeah, I'm tired. At some point, everything in me turned upside down. I could barely stand on my feet, and I had to spend the last of my strength trying not to show it in front of my father. Asterisk, 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 it was getting dark. The rain wouldn't stop. Crows were circling, clouds were floating low over the ground, and everything was shitty. Depressed and broken, I sat by my sister's grave. Her long, makeup-worn face stared at me from the crooked cross. Wreaths and once fresh flowers lay in disarray on the tumbled grave mound. I haven't visited her since the funeral. Why did you come? I asked, frowning. Why couldn't you bring your father that damn glass of water when you were alive? And why did you rise from the grave now? Will you still not calm down? The answer was a distant rumble of thunder. Somewhere beyond the forest there was an empty freight train. Rest in peace, Luba. I'll take care of my father. With these words, I got up from the bench and, no longer holding back tears and yeast all over my body, got into the car. He took one last look at the grave with the crooked cross, started the engine and drove away. My sister didn't come back. The package. In general, it all started a month ago with the fact that I had to receive a parcel, a book alone. We didn't have this book in our city, but I really wanted to read it, so I asked a friend from another city, let's call her Dasha, mail. I've probably received parcels only once or twice in my whole life, so I was waiting very much. And on Friday, it seems, in the evening already, there's a knock on the door. Rhythmically like this, knock knock, knock knock, knock knock. I was immediately wary. First of all, I wasn't expecting anyone, and they usually don't come to us without warning. Secondly, what kind of art knock competition is this? And thirdly, why knock at all if there is a bell? I looked through the peephole, some guy. I'm asking, who? They muttered something indistinctly in response to me. I only made up the word parcel. Of course, I was delighted and opened it. Wow, I think it's fast. You know how our mail works. There was not a guy standing there, as it seemed to me at first, but an adult man, just a skinny one, with a rather large box, a pen in his breast pocket, a cap pulled over his eyes. I closed the door behind me and went out onto the landing. I don't like to let strangers into the apartment. You can also sign on the railing. The uncle hands me a pen and a form, saying, get it and sign it. I took a pen, looked at the form and thought, wait a minute, why is this box so big? They should have sent me one book, but a whole series would fit in there. It's better not to take any chances with this. I signed it once without looking, but it turned out to be a mistake. I ran around later, dealt with the mail. Do I need it? She asked me to give her the box to look at. Taped up, with a sticker, as it should be. I look, my address, the sender's coordinates also seem to be the right ones. But it's kind of heavy on the weight. I shocked her, it's rolling over there. And somehow, it rustles, or something. It's like it's scratching. I shook it again. It scratched harder. And as if under your fingers you can feel the cardboard crumpling from the inside. I raise my head. This courier is silent, stands like a statue, motionless. The eyes are not visible. That's when I got a little scared. I live alone at home. It's semi-dark on the playground. The lights are always barely lit. The damn things in the package are. This is probably a mistake, I say and shove the box back to him. They were supposed to send me a book, but it's definitely not a book. He took the box and mumbled again, boo boo boo, the package. The voice is so monotonous, low. Damn it, I think, what if it's some kind of maniac? At least she asked for documents, otherwise she hung her ears. The doors were wide open. Go, I say. Write that I was not at home, then I will come to the post office and pick it up. And I look at myself. This box twitched in his hands. It was a good move. You can't write it off as a hallucination. I probably jumped over half the landing like a ballerina and slammed the door. My knees are buckling, my breath is gone, my hands are shaking, my heart is pounding. She sat down right under the door. I want to look through the peephole. Is he gone? Is he not gone? But it's scary. It's scary even through the door. And then right above my head, knock knock, knock knock, knock knock, go away. I'm screaming. Otherwise I'll call the police. Any boo boo boo, the package. I reached for the phone. It's on the bedside table next to the door, pressed some buttons and screamed, I'm calling the police. The buttons on my phone are beeping my dial, so he should have heard. I'm sitting, listening, quiet. Then I noticed that there was something in my hand. I lower my eyes. A pen. I forgot to give it back. How I threw that pen away is cleaner than a cockroach. I'm sitting, shaking, listening, quiet. And suddenly the phone rings. I almost had a heart attack. But it turned out to be a friend, not Dasha, another one. She asked me what was wrong with my voice, and I told her that some idiot was banging on the door, scared the hell out of me. In general, we chatted normally. I felt better already, and when I hung up the phone, I looked through the peephole. Thank God, no one. My heart is already relieved. So, I really came across a psycho, and then I started thinking about all sorts of supernatural stuff. And you can stuff anyone into a box, even a cat, even a rat. Brrr. The unfortunate animal. The only thing that happened to the addresses was strange. How would he know Dasha's address? The next day, just in case, she went to our post office and asked if they had one. Of course, I didn't know the name. I described it by eye. No, they don't have any skinny little men. In general, I looked around for several days, did not go outside after dark, turned on a bright light bulb on the playground, invited a friend to spend the night, then more or less calmed down. And a week later, in the evening, I hear knock knock, knock knock, knock knock. I almost had a stroke. I turned on the computer, put on headphones, turned on the music at full volume. I almost went deaf. And she did not approach. And since then, every single day, every evening, he knocks. This whole rhythm is stupid. The scariest thing is that when someone is at home, peace and quiet. But I don't have many friends. You won't invite me to your place every night. They're already squinting suspiciously. Like, you've been living alone for years, but here you were worried. Somehow I learned not to pay attention. Anyway, I stopped drinking valerian with motherwort by the liter and didn't jump up in the middle of the night. I picked up that pen, the most ordinary, cheap one, by the way, almost with tongs, and threw it away. The real package has already arrived, also by courier. And the doorbell rang, and the girl there was normal, smiling, and Tara was more suitable. But I still said I wouldn't open it. I'd pick it up at the post office myself. I shook the package for half an hour and listened before opening it. And I didn't want to look at that damn book anymore, and anyway, I think I'm going to die soon. About a week ago, strangers began to approach in the middle of the day, on the street. His eyes are empty. They pull on his sleeve and say in a muffled voice, the parcel has arrived for you. And they point a finger in the direction. I look, there's this damn man in a cap standing about 10 paces away, like a pillar. When the sun is shining, you can see that it does not cast shadows. In his hands, the box shudders. Every time it gets more crumpled, torn, some kind of tape sticks out in shreds. It gets wet from below, and something dark drips from it onto the asphalt. I grab this passerby by the shoulder and shout, "Who's standing there?" And it's like they're waking up, shying away. Some people even use obscenities to say that you idiot, are throwing yourself at people. There's no one there. What are you doing, you idiot? I look, and the courier with his damn package is gone. Silence. This nightmare happened when I came down with a severe flu. I was working in a call center back then, and I was just glad to be alone with myself. I spent my days surfing the internet, binge reading books, and sleeping. He hardly even went outside, only to the nearest grocery stall. In the second week of my illness, a small earthquake occurred, which caused a rumble in the windows and dropped a couple of magnets from the refrigerator. I discussed it with Lena on the phone, complaining about the missing internet. However, I was not particularly worried about it. There were still enough books. However, 3 days later, I still tried to call the provider. No one answered the phone. I was getting worried. Lena hasn't answered any of my calls in the last 3 days. I'm tired of wondering if she's offended by anything. My girlfriend had a habit of starting to sulk over some trifle that I hadn't noticed. So I decided to visit her, since I had already begun to recover. Going down the stairs, I saw a guy sitting on the floor by the garbage chute. His eyes were fixed on one point, and his hands were twitching strangely near his face. I thought, but I didn't figure it out. I wanted to see Lena as soon as possible. Leaving the entrance, I crossed the deserted courtyard and walked along the street. Distracted from the illness, I did not immediately understand what was wrong. And when he understood, he stopped, looking around in confusion. There was silence all around. No, it wasn't absolute. Birds were singing in the trees, yard dogs were rummaging in garbage cans. The cat meowed. But not a single car could be heard, even starting in the distance. There was no radio playing anywhere, no advertising calls. And not a single human voice. They usually sound everywhere. Snatches of conversation can be heard from the windows of the lower floors, the voices of local drunks from behind the garages, the screams of children playing, and the conversations of their mothers from the playground behind the trees. But now there was silence everywhere. Constantly looking around and wondering what happened, I went out onto the highway. And if earlier I still had some interpretations of what was happening, like some kind of celebration in the city center, or, in extreme cases, an urgent evacuation, now they all turned out to be clearly erroneous. There were cars parked all over the highway, in 2 lanes. Some of them froze, bumping into each other, and a limp hand was hanging out of the window of one. Others flew into the ditch and stayed there, abandoned by their owners. All the others were standing, heated by the midday sun, with the doors open, through which they could see the things thrown in the cabin. And there were people sitting around. All of them, as one, in dusty, well-unwashed clothes. They were all pale, trembling, with fixed eyes and wildly dilated pupils. They were sitting in the dust on the side of the road and on the hot asphalt. On the hoods of cars and, less often, in the cabin, crouching and covering their faces with shaking hands. And they were all silent. I ran through the city as if through a madman's dream. The silence around them seemed to ring. I met the silent ones everywhere, twisted, huddled in different corners. I saw a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk, and his face seemed almost spiritual. I saw a pregnant woman curled up next to an overturned stroller, in which a small child was lying in the same position. I was more scared than ever. I didn't know what was going on around me. I just hoped that this horror hadn't affected Lena or any of my friends. But with every silent person I met, my hope faded. Finally, I got to the house where my Lena lived. He pushed away some guy crouching at the very door of the entrance. He ran up the stairs, ignoring the empty-eyed old ladies sitting there. He opened the apartment door with his key and went inside. And he sighed, not knowing whether to be happy or sad. Everything said that Lena had gone to work. She always put her home clothes in a neat pile on the hallway nightstand so that she could change right away when she returned. So it's worth looking for her at the hospital. And certainly nothing happened to her there, because the doctors are there, they will help. Emboldened by this childish faith in invulnerable and omniscient doctors, I moved to the hospital. I was able to walk past the silent people frozen on benches in the corridor. An unknown nightmare overtook them while they were sitting in line. I got lost, wandered into surgery, and being silent on the operating table, staring blankly at my insides, I will have the worst nightmares. But I broke down on a boy in a wheelchair. He had a pale, handsome face, his head lolling helplessly against the headrest, and empty eyes staring at the white hospital ceiling. He was the only one whose hands weren't shaking. Apparently they just couldn't. I couldn't either. I screamed and ran away, not reaching Lena's office just 100 meters away. With his eyes squeezed shut, not feeling his feet, he ran through the hospital corridors. Stumbling, falling, and getting up again, I ran to Lena's house, barely hitting the keyhole with the key. I slid the bolt, leaned against the door, and burst into tears. A day later, I came to my senses a little. I couldn't get back to the hospital, but I walked around the entrance, pulling on the door handles. I was lucky with one apartment. The door opened. There were 3 silent people inside, a young couple and their 5-year-old daughter, sitting among scattered toys that had already begun to get covered in dust. I found a calendar in which the baby crossed out the days remaining before her birthday. The date circled with a heart was the day before yesterday. But I found out that the trouble happened on the day of the earthquake. What happened? I found out the answer to this question the next day when I dared to go outside. First, I saw that the silent ones were trying to walk. Their movements resembled movie zombies, but they still walked. I didn't know if it was for good or not. Secondly, I got to the main city square, and there I saw something strange. It was a funnel that occupied almost the entire rather large area. Its edges were melted. At least it becomes clear what kind of earthquake it was. But what exactly left the funnel? I started keeping a diary. I stole canned goods from stores, noticed a couple of things in case the apocalypse dragged on. I seized a bicycle from a silent man. He didn't mind. My psyche returned to a semblance of normality, but I continued to avoid the hospital. However, he decided to explore the apartments of his friends without finding any. The doors of most of the apartments were open, and the interior was empty. Now the silent ones could walk quite cheerfully. I do not know where or why they went. I only know that some of the silent ones left the city altogether, and some moved through the streets in small groups. They didn't touch me, skirting around if we bumped into each other. I won't say that I wasn't satisfied with it. One evening, the electricity went out. Then water. The next day, I got a generator and brought bottles from the nearest store. There I smashed a display case with expensive drinks and dragged them home. It helped a little bit. Quite a bit. If you live in silence for so long, you begin to react very sharply to any sounds. They rang out twice. For the first time, I heard the sound of a roaring engine from the street, and running out onto the balcony, I saw a reckless motorcyclist rushing down the street at a wild speed. I screamed until I lost my voice, jumped and waved my arms, but he didn't notice me. Tears were streaming down my cheeks as the sound of the engine faded into the distance. But at least I'm not alone. The second time the sounds were much more strange. A low humming that gives off pain in my teeth and in parts of my brain that I haven't even heard of. It came from the street, from around the corner of the house. I went out of the house and peeked around the corner very carefully. What I saw there is indescribable. Several dozen silent people, with unearthly bliss written on their faces, listened to what was making these sounds. It wasn't a man. It was tall, twice the height of a man. He had translucent white skin, too many legs and eyes. I gasped and backed away. Sensing me, the creature turned its head. His gaze burned my eyeballs and heated the air in my lungs. While I was coughing and rubbing my eyes, the creature disappeared. And the silent ones looked at me, and their faces, recently insensitive and dead, distorted with undisguised contempt. I turned around and ran. This time I spent the night at my house. And even though there was no water and electricity here, but at least such creatures do not walk under the windows. From the balcony, I saw that the silent ones had developed some kind of violent activity. They took furniture and electrical appliances out of the houses and carried them somewhere. The buzzing of creatures came from everywhere, and I shuddered when it sounded very close. Sometimes the silent ones carried by strange constructions, the purpose of which was unclear to me. Anyway, I wasn't ready to think about it right now. My eyes were on fire and my lungs were ready to burst. I coughed continuously. Even blood, it seems. Although I'm not sure. Dark. Exhausted, I fell asleep. Hey, wake up. Someone was shaking my shoulder. You need to take your medicine. What? I barely opened my eyes. A blurry face loomed in front of me. Lena? My God, it's you. You're alive. I tried to get up, but weakness came over me. His voice sounded hoarse, and his throat was pounding mercilessly. Of course I'm alive, she frowned. You had a bad dream, you were screaming. No wonder, with such a temperature. I told you yesterday that I would come. Yesterday? What's the date today? I asked weakly. July 13th. There was an earthquake yesterday, remember? We were still talking. You said that there was no internet and that you were going to bed. Lena touched my forehead with her hand and shook her head. Now there is a terrible flu in the city. I thought it would be better to take the day off and be with you. A car alarm was going off on the street and a child was screaming for his mother. I closed my eyes. So I was dreaming, and my city is not quiet at all. And people are talking. And there are no aliens here. I smiled. Lena kissed me gently on my sweaty forehead and handed me a pill and a cup of sweet tea. Drink the medicine. I rolled a bitter pill in my mouth and washed it down with tea. My throat hurt, but then it got better. Drowsiness attacked me, and I leaned back on the pillow. For some reason, the eyes did not close. The ceiling started an unthinkable dance in front of them. It was so interesting to watch her. I smiled again, feeling my hands start to shake. Somewhere in the background, Lena was talking on the phone. Yes, I gave you a pill. No, it will definitely work. His immune system will shut down, and the radiation will do the rest. Tomorrow he will be one of us. Yeah. Yes. Of course, I will do everything. He belongs on the ship's construction site. I hope the Lords will appreciate his talents. He is a really good person and worth any effort. I'm sure of him. Yes? The last thing I heard was a low hum that my beloved Lena made. We'll be together very soon.